Hey everyone, it's Ankylosaur. I hope you're all doing well. For today's video, I have a set of 4 competitive Pauper EDH decks that are each under $40 US at the time of recording, or about the price of a new pre-constructed deck. If you already have a CPDH playgroup, hopefully one of these lists will pique your interest as your next deck to build in the format. And if you don't have a group, but know some people who might be interested in giving CPDH a try, I specifically picked these 4 decks because I think they'll play well together to make a strong yet well-balanced pod with lots of interaction and interesting decision-making throughout. I have an aggro deck, a mid-range deck, a combo deck, and a combo control deck for you. And I'll highlight some of my favorite cards and play patterns for each of them. So if you're picking them up for the first time, you won't be completely in the dark. So with all that out of the way, let's jump right into these CPDH Precons. Our first deck is Loyal Subordinate. Loyal Subordinate, or Larry as he's known, is a 3-mana 3/1 with Menace, who has a Lieutenant ability. At the beginning of combat on your turn, if you control your commander, each opponent loses 3 life. The cool thing about Larry in CPDH is, he is our commander. Therefore, as long as he's on the battlefield, his Lieutenant ability will always trigger at the beginning of each of our combats, hitting our opponents for 3 apiece without even having to attack. That's 10% of their life total gone, every turn, just for having our commander in play. We're running several ways to get Larry down as quickly as possible, including Blood Pet, Cabal Ritual, and Dark Ritual, to start the damage flowing as early as turn 1. A good upgrade for this deck would be Lotus Petal, which I didn't include because they're still a bit pricey, but if you have one in your collection already, this would be a perfect deck to slot it into. It's another great way to power out a turn 2 Larry. The rest of the deck is devoted to aggressive creatures, card draw, and removal to make sure that our creatures connect. We have several creatures that drain the table when they die, to pair alongside cards like Village Rites, to turn them into more cards and more damage. And we're running a number of Grave Flickers as well, cards that return a creature from our graveyard to the battlefield when it dies, to couple with our sacrifice effects and get more triggers. My favorite card in the deck is our secret commander, Shepherd of Rot. Shepherd really turns up the heat on our opponents, tapping to make each player lose life equal to the number of zombies in play. A full half of the creatures in our deck are zombies, including our commander, so Shepherd should be tapping to deal 3, 4, maybe 5 damage per activation, greatly increasing our clock speed and making each Larry trigger hurt that much more. I'm also a big fan of Thieves' Tools. This 2-mana equipment makes us a treasure token when it comes into play, and then equips to make one of our creatures with power 3 or less unblockable. This is a great way to sneak in extra damage with Larry, but also perfect with Audacious Thief, or Infectious Horror, to get their attack triggers without the risk of losing them in combat. If you like being the player to put pressure on the rest of the table, while holding a grip full of removal for anything that gets in your way, Loyal Subordinate might be the deck for you. Next up, we have a mid-range deck with a heavy tokens theme, and that's Kadira, Caller of the Small. Kadira is a 3-mana 3/3 trampler with an ability that reads, whenever Kadira, Caller of the Small, deals combat damage to a player, for each token you control, create a 1/1 rabbit creature token. As you might guess, she's all about running our opponents over with an army of bunnies. We have a bunch of ways to make tokens in the deck, including food, treasures, and creatures, ensuring that we'll be making as many rabbits as possible whenever we connect with our commander. Then, once we have a giant bunny squad, we can pump our team up with cards like Steadfast Unicorn and Esquire of the King, as well as one of the best overruns in the format, Guardian's Pledge. Much of the rest of the deck is dedicated to getting Kadira out as quickly as possible, and then protecting her from removal. She can be sort of a lightning rod, so we have plenty of ways to give her hexproof or indestructible to ensure that we get to battle with her and make our bunnies. One of my favorite pieces of tech is Fanatical Devotion. With all of the creature tokens we have lying around, we can protect Kadira or any other creature on our board from almost all of the removal in the format. We also get to run two great common backgrounds in the deck in Master Chef and Flaming Fist. Flaming Fist is especially exciting, as it lets us double up on Kadira's combat damage trigger, which gets totally out of control. Imagine we start with just 2 rabbit tokens in play. Our first hit with Kadira makes 2 more, and then regular damage gives us 4 additional bunnies. Then, next turn, we double our 8 tokens again to 16 on first strike, then up to 32. In just 2 combats! With 32 bunnies, we can probably kill any one player at the table that we like, and if Kadira connects again, we'll have 128 rabbits to finish off the rest of the pod as well. Kadira doesn't have the non-combat damage reach that Larry does, but she has a lot of staying power. She's excellent at pressuring the combo decks, who often won't have a blocker for Kadira if we get her down early. And once we start making rabbits, the only thing that will stop us is a well-timed sweeper. If you like making tokens and lots of them, give Kadira a whirl. She's a ton of fun. Next is our first combo deck in the pod, and that's Tatyova Benthic Druid. Tatyova is one of the old boogeymen of the format, a resilient flicker combo deck that gains a lot of life and draws a bunch of cards. In fact, Tatyova can gain infinite life and generate infinite mana, which, with one of several different mana sinks in the deck, can win you the game all in one big turn. She's a 5-mana 3/3 with a landfall ability that reads, whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life and draw a card. As you might expect, this means the Tatyova deck is full of ways to get extra lands into play. We're running everything from Farseek and 3 Visits to the commander staples Cultivate and Kodama's Reach to ensure that we get as many Tatyova triggers as possible. We also have a number of creatures that tap to put a land from our hand out of the battlefield, like Skyshroud Ranger and Scaled Herbalist. These are some of the most important creatures in our deck, as they allow us to combo off with Mystic Sanctuary and a lesser-known card from Mercadian Masks called Tidal Bore. The combo works like this. With Tatyova, a creature that puts a land into play, Mystic Sanctuary, and 3 islands on the battlefield, so the Sanctuary will come into play untapped, we activate one of our Scaled Herbalist effects to put a land onto the battlefield. Holding priority, we cast Tidal Bore for its alternate cost, returning Mystic Sanctuary to our hand, and targeting our Herbalist to untap it. Now the Herbalist trigger resolves, and we put Mystic Sanctuary into play. We get 2 triggers, one from Tatyova, to draw a card and gain a life, and one from the Mystic Sanctuary, which we'll use to target the Tidal Bore in our graveyard. It's important that we stack the triggers in the correct order. We want Mystic Sanctuary to resolve first, so that Tidal Bore goes back on top of our deck, and then we draw it again with Tatyova. Now, we tap Mystic Sanctuary for a blue mana, tap our Herbalist again, and Tidal Bore it the same way that we just did, untapping our creature, and bouncing Mystic Sanctuary, so we can put it back into play, make another mana with it, and get back Tidal Bore. This loop will gain us infinite life, but more importantly, generates infinite blue mana. From here, we can win the game in a couple different ways. The first involves Capsize, one of my favorite infinite mana outlets. We can cast it with buyback as many times as we want, returning all of our opponent's permanents to their hands every turn for the rest of the game, and eventually winning with some commander beatdown. If we have Whispers of the Muse instead, we can cast that with buyback too, drawing through our deck until we hit one of our other combos. For instance, with 2 Archaeomancer-style creatures in play, plus a Ghostly Flicker, we can flicker both of our Archaeomancers, returning Ghostly Flicker and another spell to our hand. With infinite mana, we can do this as much as we like, so with a spell like Compulsive Research, Deep Analysis, or the first mode on Sapphire Charm, we can target our opponents over and over again to make them draw out their decks and lose the game. The cool thing about Sapphire Charm is that it's an instant, as is Tidal Bore, so we can combo off on someone's end step, or in response to a blue player tapping out, winning the game as each of our opponents are forced to draw 1,000,000 cards during the next upkeep. The Archaeomancers are part of the deck's other combo, and that's with Peregrine Drake. The Drake combo is fairly straightforward. With an Archaeomancer and Ghostly Flicker, you can blink both Drake and Archaeomancer, returning Ghostly Flicker to hand and untapping 5 lands. As Ghostly Flicker only costs 3 mana, this will allow us to float 2 mana each time we cast it, generating infinite mana, which can then be used for Capsize or Whispers of the Muse or whatever payoff we have in order to win the game from there. Practicing these two main combo lines, with either Tidal Bore or Ghostly Flicker, will definitely benefit you if you decide to pick up the deck, but they aren't particularly difficult to learn. And if you like land ramp and drawing cards, I think you'll find Tatyova to be a powerful deck that's also a lot of fun to play. Finally, we have our last deck, a more controlling Izzet deck that's also looking to combo off for the win, and that's Malcolm Breaches. Red Malcolm decks are traditionally focused on the interaction between Malcolm, who is a 3-mana 2/2 that makes treasure tokens whenever a pirate deals damage to one of our opponents, and creatures with activated or triggered abilities that deal damage to each opponent. If we turn a Gutter Snipe into a pirate with something like Wings of Velasvel, now each time we cast an instant or sorcery spell, Gutter Snipe will not only deal 2 damage to each of our opponents, will also make 3 treasure tokens as well. If we don't have a way to turn these pingers into pirates, they also work exceptionally well with Ophidian Eye and Tandem Lookout, drawing us 1 card per opponent dealt damage, helping us draw into even more spells to cast to deal more damage, draw more cards, and so on. Breaches is another source of card advantage that we have in our command zone. Whenever one of our pirates deals damage to an opponent, we get to steal the top card of that player's library, and we can cast it this turn. Combined with Malcolm, we're both making mana and virtually drawing cards, which can quickly snowball out of hand. And if we ever get a Reckless Fireweaver or Ingenious Artillerist turned into a pirate while Malcolm's in play, we win the game as soon as an artifact enters the battlefield. Our new pirate will trigger to deal damage to each opponent, which will make us treasure tokens from Malcolm, which will trigger our pirate again to deal more damage, to make more treasure, in a loop that will kill our opponents on the spot. Malcolm Breach's approach to this strategy involves being patient and playing control, rather than looking to turbo out a combo win. In the early to mid-game, we're mostly interested in making our land drops and ramping a bit with mana rocks, holding up interaction to make sure we don't die, and drawing a few more cards here and there with things like Behold the Multiverse or Network Terminal. Meanwhile, we might run out a pinger or two to deal a bit of incidental damage to our opponents. These pingers, in combination with the curiosity effects drawing us a bunch of cards, are the way that we tend to win the game. Eventually, we find a way to make a pinger into a pirate, and can go off with Malcolm and Breaches, making us a ton of mana and stealing cards from our opponents. But this is more of a late game plan for the deck. And sometimes our card advantage, plus the damage from a board full of pingers, is enough to take out the table on its own. No pirate combo needed. My favorite cards in the deck are Goblin Matron and Step Through. You can use them to grab a Gutter Snipe or an Image Crafter, but much more often they're going to search up a Blades of Velasvel or Wings of Velasvel, our instant speed type changers that have the Changeling ability, which means that they count as all creature types, even in our deck. So they're goblins we can grab with Goblin Matron, as well as wizards we can find with Wizard Cycling. It's a cute synergy, and if you like tutors like that, I see lists running Vidalcan Ether Mage sometimes as well for the same reason. If you like playing the control game, while also having a combo to end the game quickly, you might enjoy the Malcolm Breaches deck. So those are our 4 CPDH Precon decks. As I mentioned before, I think these would make for a pretty balanced pod, with a good mix of strategies and colors for folks who are new to the format to experience the diversity of what competitive Pauper EDH has to offer. But, as I was building decks, I made a few extras, just in case you wanted to customize your own pod even further. So down in the video description, I have links to some other lists under $40 that you might check out as well. I put together a Malcolm Kedis Precon, in case you like the idea of Is It Combo, but want something a little less controlling and a little more focused on finding your combo pieces and winning the game quickly. I also have a Gut, True Soul Zealot, and Inspiring Leader deck that you could swap in for the Larry or Kadira decks. It's a much more aggressive and sacrifice-based take on tokens, making 4/1 skeletons with menace each turn that turn into 6/3s with your background. It's a lot of fun and puts a ton of pressure on the table. So if you like the idea of sacking your permanents for value and attacking with huge skeletons, please check out that one as well. I also updated my Satyr Enchanter list, which is a green-white Voltron style deck looking to cast a ton of auras on either your commander or one of your difficult to block creatures, draw a bunch of cards, and win the game in just a handful of huge attacks. And finally, I have Aranis Gloomstalker and Criminal Past, a green-black mid-range deck with a lot of self-mill cards and recursion to churn through your deck, find the answers you need to the board, and beat down with your enormous, death-touching, menacing commander. I hope between these 8 decks, you'll find 1 or 2 that you like for yourself, or even 4 for you and your friends to play against each other and learn my new favorite way to play Magic. Thanks so much for watching, everybody, and until next time, I hope you have a good one. Bye!